welcome. We have a couple of administrative items to take care of at the beginning of the meeting, one of which is that we have 3 sets of meeting minutes to approve. One of the consequences of meeting once a week is that we accumulate lots of meeting minutes. And Elena circulated them all. We also, as you know, have video posted online of the entirety of all of our meetings, but we have to approve minutes anyway. So we have September 2nd, September 9th, and September 16th minutes, and I would entertain a motion to approve. I guess we should do them separately. The September 2nd minutes.
I move to approve the September 2nd minutes.
I second.
Got 2 seconds.
Any revisions or comments? For what it's worth, for all 3 of these minutes, I thought Elena did a good job of summarizing what was on the video. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Approve. Aye.
Opposed? It is 6-0. September 9th committee meeting minutes. Can we get a motion to approve those?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any comments or revisions?
I just abstained because I wasn't at the meeting.
All in favor?
I'm abstaining because I was also not at the meeting.
Okay. Everyone else in favor? I just want to make sure there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4-0 with 2 abstentions. And Senator Lockman and Jeff were the abstentions. And then the September 16th minutes, can we get a motion to approve those?
Move to approve the September 16th minutes.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or changes? And if not, all those in favor of approving the minutes? Did you say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 6-0. That's the last of the minutes.
Right.
We are going to have to, for item 3 on the agenda, we're going to have to do that at our next meeting, which is the written resolution that was the outcome of the discussion on early education. We will have to do that at at either next week's meeting or the meeting after. I think it was pretty straightforward what was recommended, so hopefully it'll be
Easy to
yeah.
review. And we can probably get that out by the end of this week, like, so it won't be like right before the meeting. It's my fault that we aren't reviewing it today. I'll just take that on the record. I didn't approve it in time.
We can leave that out of the minutes.
No, put them in there.
Okay.
Be accountable.
Okay. So that brings us to item 4, which is talking about the institution of specialized programs at City of Wilmington schools. And just to sort of, as a reminder, we had the opportunity a few weeks ago to hear from several people who had some sort of specialized expertise in a couple of the subject areas that we had been asked by the consortium to consider. Lisa Lawson had talked to us about Brandywine's gifted program, and we had a few folks here who had some experience with language-based learning disabilities education and Kathy Craven former head of pilot school was one of them, and she's also here with us tonight. So we had a lot of very good discussion about it. We had a chance to hear from some members of the public on it as well. And then it was suddenly the end of the meeting. And we had never really had a chance to discuss it among ourselves as a committee. And I think some of the committee members also just wanted a chance to go back and think about it a little bit, because some of these things were a little bit newer to us than some of the areas that we had talked about at prior meetings. So that's really where we are tonight, is trying to have a discussion to follow up on what we were able to learn at the earlier meeting. And I think Elena had sent back around the document from the consortium that's kind of our guidance for what we're supposed to be looking at with this issue specifically. And it's on pages 8 and 9. So just in terms of guiding our discussion here, it's at the list of questions for us is at the very end on page 9. So there's sort of a threshold question, as there is with, I guess, everything that we've been talking about, of do we want to forward this on at all to get cost estimates and get community, some additional community reaction, or do we just want to take it off the table from the get-go? There's an additional question, which is, I think what number 1 is targeted at, of if we do recommend something like this, do we want it to be something that is required of whatever newly created school district results from this work, or do we want it to be something that's available as an option if the district wants to do it, but not required? The second question is if there are any kinds of safeguards that should be put in place with respect to these programs if we recommend them to ensure that some of the potential negative consequences don't come to be. And then the third question is sort of more specifically what types of programs ought to be included, and what schools ought to be targeted. And we got some specific recommendations from the consortium in terms of types of programs, but it's not necessarily an exclusive list. So those are kind of the questions that are outlined here, and we can get your.
I mean, I was willing to jump in with the first comment, just sort of on my general thoughts on it. And I was not here on the 9th when this was discussed, so I'm also kind of just coming fresh to the conversation on this, but I just kind of wanted to put in, for whatever it's worth to others. I think I think that obviously there's a lot of strengths that are provided in our exposition around this as to why there's a good case to be made for there being specialized magnetization in the city, and thinking through ways for the state to incentivize that. What I wanted to say is I see this as very deeply connected to what's on page 7 of the same document. This is sort of our choice and charter reform or choice reform area. I see it as kind of a component of a larger conversation about choice and charter. And I think I'm somewhat concerned about us being too prescriptive for the future LEA or LEAs on, I guess, just in terms of very specific specificity around programming or beyond incentivization, putting incentives in place. So I just wanted to put that there. I think on the 14th, we're going to be talking about what might it look like to charge any newly created or newly impacted LEAs with looking holistically at choice and charter reform. And I see this as a very important part of that, but it's not all of that. And so for me, the conversation about this feels a little bit like an orphan in a larger conversation. So I just wanted to put that perspective in there. I see them as very interrelated. So I will probably struggle a little bit with feeling complete on this until we've had that other conversation. That's my thoughts.
And I have some thoughts on all three, but I encourage other committee members to weigh in if you do. Going once?
So I'm just curious, because I've read the charge that we received from the writing group around this specialized schools or specialized programs. But when you read through it, there's a difference between like a program and a magnet school. So what are we trying to discern between here? Because if it's programs, I would argue that's something that's readily doable now. Like you could bring a special program like AVID or AP or IB or like you can bring a program to any school versus a magnet school is a very specific, it's like that's Cab Calloway or, you know, um,
Um,
Conrad, right? Those are magnet schools within Red Clay that were designed for a specific purpose of actually, supporting, you know, a certain program to all students, yada, 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 a focused education. I would, so I'm just curious, like, because if you're, and I know we're talking like probably elementary, but if you get into the middle and high school programs or things like CTE programs, you have allied health, you have music programs, you have art programs, schools that have, there's themes it's as easy to do without tagging yourself a magnet. So I guess I wasn't at the meeting, so I want to make sure like what are we talking about magnet schools that are programs that are like theme based, or are we talking about schools that just should be able to have an AVID program, a honors program, etc. I guess that's where I just need clarification.
Yeah, the document that we got from Reading is pretty specific that it's programs and not magnet schools. And it
Okay.
distinguishes between, I think it says traditional magnet schools and this. So I think it's more along the lines of, I mean, the example that we've been using is the Brandywine gifted program, and I don't think that they describe those schools as magnet schools.
No.
Um, so I mean, maybe it's just nomenclature, but
Yeah, so
maybe.
yeah, then I mean then I would think that this is something that you might want to cost out if that kind of program, because that's staff intensive, that's program. These are all staff intensive if you're going to do these programs. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's a reallocation of different staff or an additional staff member to do these types of programs, which I think is personally, it's an easier lift than doing all the other fancy stuff because you can really, a school can get a theme, can adopt a program, they can create an identity, they can repurpose positions in like exploratories, electives. And then to enhance on those, you do get, you try to use local dollars, but you also go to special grants and fundings and outside groups want to support it. So I, I don't inherently see this as problematic from a carrying it out perspective. I just think the bigger thing is like if we all come together, if we do the option where all four districts come together, like there's got to be a little bit of conversation around, the schools and the governance of them and what programs are going to stick, what might work. But I think getting an idea of how much does it cost from Brandywine to run a gifted and talented program would be wise. Margie's got some programs. Like, how much do some of these programs cost above and beyond or unit wise? I think it would be helpful to know. Just to know, not to mandate, Tizzy. I wouldn't mandate it, but to know, I think the room should know that.
I mean,
I agree with that, Jeff. I mean, because I think back to what we wanted to be sure that we weren't just playing a shell game with our students, right? So it's not just moving kids around and putting them in different districts and renaming things and redrawing lines, but it was about what are we going to do differently to support
Right.
those students. So this journey has been sort of collecting ideas of different programs that are out there. But I agree with Jeff and what Tizzy said, like we don't want to be prescriptive. You got to let the leaders lead. You've got to let them create and adopt programs that meet the needs of their students. And So I think it's good that we collect the information. And the last meeting when we had like the individuals from pilot school, what I heard from them was examples of best practices. It's not necessarily a program. It's just that they were sharing some great best practices and how to address the needs of students with developmental needs and other special education needs. So that was a good exchange of information. But once again, it's you can't have necessarily those strategies without some additional funding, because as you heard from the presentation from them, they definitely have a whole different model as far as how much revenue they're getting per student, how they're staffed, the classroom size, the ratio, teacher and student ratio. So I believe that we need to at least factor in those additional funding needs, but not be prescriptive in how they use it.
Yeah, and I think I mean, this question coming up made me think about, what all of this is going to look like, at the very end when we recommend whatever we recommend. And I think that the same question probably applies to everything that we've talked about before also, in terms of wraparound services or salary premiums or boost programs, whatever. I think that, I mean, we have some responsibility to be specific about what we propose because we have to put costs on it and it's supposed to be a cohesive plan. But I also think that, there has to be some ability on the back end for whatever school district ends up, receiving this, to be able to come to the state and get some type of waiver or adjustment for, what it is that we put out. Because, I mean, because, we should have some, humility in terms of not necessarily seeing around every corner and knowing, how all these things are going to fit together. And also, this stuff's not going to happen for, years. And, facts on the ground change over time. So, I think that, when all of this, when whatever comes back to the full consortium comes back and we talk about how are we going to incorporate this into a proposed plan, I mean, that, I feel like we're going to want to say, this is what we think it should look like. This is what we think it will cost. But, there's got to be a mechanism if this is put in for a school district to say, hey, this doesn't work for us as written and we want it to be adjusted. I just think I don't know any way around that part of it.
But to me, I mean, I could see the utility of costing out maybe specific types of programs that we think, are examples of, like, bring with them examples of best practices that maybe we think are not common enough. I could see that, but I still feel like where we could be the most effective in this process of attaching recommendations to the redistricting proposal is probably more in asking the LEAs to do something on the other side of this and giving them guardrails, which I think could come with like some of the specific ideas of what schools should be or whether they should be concentrated in the city of Wilmington for a particular reason. I think to me, it's that piece of the questions on page 9. Like, I think what we heard most in the town halls, it's concerns about what are the safeguards that prevent the landscape of options from being what people have some objections around now, like what's missing or what's really hard to access for high need students. Those kinds of things, I feel like, and maybe those aren't necessarily costable things, but I think that there are things that we could ask of an LEA to develop strategies, bearing those in mind, like with DOE, and it would be more helpful for us to provide cost estimates in advance so that when they're working with DOE, they can be more thoughtful about, okay, we're going to make sure we have this, this, and this. I could see the utility of that, but I don't know that. Yeah, I worry about being prescriptive in what we attach to the plan, other than asking the LEAs where the expertise lives to be like choice charter policy, magnet programs. We're asking you to be more thoughtful holistically about how you do that. Here's some ideas and some guardrails.
So
That's-
yeah, So I'm trying to read this question. I was reading it over and over again, Tizzy, and then when you were talking about the question again, I went back to it. There, so this is talking about, in the way I'm reading it now, is like in Colonial, we have Spanish immersion at Wilbur. It's a choice program. Like kids can choice into Wilbur for Spanish immersion. Right? That's a special program,
Mhm.
specific that anybody can choice into. So is this question asking us, should that be on the table for the schools in the city of Wilmington? If yes, how much does it cost? I mean, they have DOE, people have how much went into this program in all districts, and they run it how they run it. Like, so some of these programs, like if if Brandywine's gifted and talented program is a choice program, they should have a cost model of like how much it costs to do it. And do we want it to, should it be an option? Like, so it doesn't sound to me necessarily like we're saying you need to design one, but there are other ones out there to look at to see how much they cost. I'm trying to figure out like, because this doesn't, it says whether the design of specialized school-specific program should be a part of its own proposal or request. I don't know how you keep it out, but isn't is isn't there choice right now inside the city of Wilmington? Don't they
Yeah.
they can choice to, like, I know charter school of Wilmington, they can choice to the Kumba. They can is it are there special, not Kumba, they applied it to Kumba through a lottery, but are there any other schools where they're choicing in the city of Wilmington? Bayard,
I mean,
students can choice to Bayard, right?
yeah, you can choice, but I,
choose to anywhere that's
Yeah.
not your feeder pattern school.
Yeah.
I think the more meaningful trend in that regard, gifted and talented has come up a lot, and I know Brandywine has a very specifically designed and dedicated way of approaching that. My experience as a Wilmington student was that, we had some really strong examples of gifted and talented service provision in the city, specifically at Warner Elementary, which I guess it was around the time Brandywine Springs was built. There was no longer that, at least in Red Clay in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like there was a program that existed in a strong way and people were funneled to it. And now that was no longer, at least in that footprint, or I guess anywhere in the city, was no longer present. So I think it's more like thinking about the equitable distribution of those programs. I guess would ask, what is the value? Is the value about equitable distribution of programs for the purpose of access? Is it about incentivizing socioeconomic integration? Like what I think that might help too, to like know, like, well, what are we getting at?
I'm not the biggest fan for individualized programs, specialized programs.
Oh,
Only
says
because
the cab mom.
well, with that being said, only because I believe that all children should have that chance or that experience that they had.
Comprehensively, like
Right.
more comprehensive.
Meaning they all should have some type of strategies and skills that come from magnet programs and that come from gifted programs.
Mhm.
Like it shouldn't be a stipulation on who's talent, who's gifted and who's magnet. Like, what if we just adopted those best practices into the schools and see who is gifted and just enhance that instead of just making it a specialized thing? Like the whole school should be specialized.
Like a comprehensive school.
Yeah, I mean, you think
opposed
about
to-
it, if you think about how many IEPs and 405s we have right now, we gotta do something to turn that around. So instead of focusing on things that they cannot do, let's focus on things that they might be able to do and push them to get there.
Hmm.
Cause just think about our kids beg and plead and spit blood to go to our two magnet schools. So if we can open the doors for them to have a better experience and adopt some of those best practices that they're doing over there and creating those environments at every school,
Mm.
then you have how many schools that are magnet and gifted?
And I think that's hard to do if you're not looking at the whole system as a whole system, as an LEA.
Well, keep in mind that right now we have a regulation. I mean, every LEA, well, I mean, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how it is for the districts, but aren't we all going through this process with the Department of Education of putting together our gifted and talented plans? They're due next year.
Oh.
Yeah, so
we
it's no
all,
longer a nice to have. Everyone has to have a
Yeah.
solution for gifted and talented.
you
Oh,
have to have
interesting.
everyone has to have a program in it. They might not all look the same, but there are certain
Yeah.
parameters that we have to have a district leader, we have to have certain certification of teachers. There's all kinds of parameters around it that are
With no funding, but
with
yeah.
no funding that are
that's
correct,
hard.
which is what there's a long runway into this, but there's still no funding coming with it, which still makes it a very Herculean effort because something has to give somewhere. So I'm not really sure how that's going to land, but
Well, so if there's certain streams of programming that will value, whether it's spread out or concentrated, gifted and talented keeps coming up, immersion keeps coming up. I mean, do we make and I think there's other examples like a pilot approach. But funding's not coming with them currently, which seems like a problem we should be thinking about solving. Like, is that what we do? Do we come up with like a menu of recommended magnet program streams that have a cost attached? I mean, because our exercise here is to come up with things that we can put dollar signs to, right?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, there may not be a big difference between providing a menu and what I suggested, which was saying this is what we think it should be, but you can apply to wave out of it and do something else. And the reason I think that it's important for us to put something out there is that if we do not, then people are going to default to what's already out there and what's easy to do. And that's gonna leave behind, like, for example, there is no in-school program for kids with language-based learning disabilities in any
Mhm.
traditional public school now. And that is more challenging to set up than a gifted program, or an immersion program. So if we just say, here's some choices, do what you want, I think the odds are pretty good that schools will pick the easy ones that they can just copy from an existing program, and those kids will be left without a program. So I think it's important for us to at least put something out, again, with the opportunity for them to be able to come back and say, you know, this is not doable for whatever reason that wasn't anticipated. But I mean, just going back to your original question of like, why do this? Period. Again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, these are programs, the examples that we've been talking about that currently are just not available to kids who live in the city as a practical matter, unless they happen to live in the Brandywine School District. So, there's a difference between a gifted and talented program, which for most schools is like one period a day, and there's a wait list, and you maybe get in and you maybe don't. There's a difference between that and what Brandywine does, which is a pretty much full day, very challenging program that not necessarily every kid, wants or is able to keep up with. And right now, if you live in Brandywine, you can get that. If you don't, you pretty much can't. And I think, and I would love for kids in the city to be able to get into it, and also to have first dibs on it. So if they're in the theater pattern.
I know middle-class families in the city of Wilmington who send their kids to gifted and talented in Brandywine, like on a pretty consistent basis.
Okay.
But the low-income kids with less capacity in the families to apply are struggling. So to me, it's less an issue of the presence of the programs, and they're more embedded structural issues in our choice policy.
Or if they're in your kid's school already, and there's, an opt-in or an opt-out, type setup where they automatically get evaluated for it. I mean, it's different if it's in your feeder pattern school, than if you have to choice in, and presumably they have to get their own transportation because Brandywine doesn't provide bus transportation if you don't
Yeah.
live in Brandywine. So it's just different if it's in the school. Same thing with language-based learning disabilities. We had talked about an arts program. Same thing with that. So for me, it's just part of, let's make these schools as good as they can possibly be, A, for the kids, B, because I do think that if there's exciting things going on in the schools that parents like, that causes teachers to like to teach there and stay there. It causes principals to want to come there and stay there. If there's, if there are innovative things that are good for kids happening in the schools. And compared to some of the other things that we've been talking about, they're not, from the limited information that we've had so far, they're not on the costlier end of, the sorts of options that we've been having. So they're also, even the language-based learning disabilities, we heard at the last meeting that I think there was like a ballpark of $40,000 per child at, Pilot. And I was just on the DOE website yesterday, and the state has each school break down, its cost per pupil, by school. And for Shortledge, Warner, Byard, Pritchett, the cost per student for all kids, with or without IEPs, it's like 25 or 26,000 up to, I think, 32 or 33,000 for Byard. So, and that's for all kids. And, your general rule of thumb is double or triple that number for a child who's on an IEP versus one who's not. So even for, language-based learning disabilities, $40,000 a year, and the student body at Pilot and college school in Centerville is not the same as the student body at Byard. So I'm sure that there's some things that aren't apples to apples, but $40,000 per student is not, per student with a diagnosed disability, isn't at first blush hugely different from what we spend now. So I've been going on too long, but those are, I think there's a number of reasons why we ought to talk about them. And I do think that there is a way to put it out there with some flexibility for schools, on the back end to have the ability to tailor what they do.
Senator Loughlin, there's a comment in the chat from Jim Simmons. I noted he put this in there a while ago, but it said, once again, Jeff and I are on the same page. But I would add how you define and categorize programs. There's also an issue of students with disabilities in those programs. And then Stephanie Ingram also had her hand raised earlier. So,
So Stephanie.
Well, it's okay. Thank you. I'm just going to raise something that came up yesterday on the educator advisory panel. We were talking and, in an attempt to kind of draw some students back to these schools to think about, like Matt said, some innovative programming that could be happening at these schools. Some things that were mentioned, we're having for the younger students, more art focused, art, theater, music, those types of things, and also maybe more of a STEM focus. They're not really exposed to those types of things until the middle school or the high school. So maybe to give younger students those kinds of programmings would kind of pull folks back into the schools. And again, jazz up what's happening, get people excited about being a part of those programs. We talked about immersion a little bit yesterday in the specialized program that's happening at Lewis and thinking about what that looks like. And then having a conversation to think about the information that was presented to us. What does it look like for us if we were to able to kind of replicate some of the things we learned about what's happening at the pilot school, right? If we had the opportunity to think about giving those services to all the students in a school or a grade, and then kind of adding a next grade the next year, to next grade the next year, what does that look like and how much would that cost? I'm just asking us to think about the resources that we have, how we could use them differently, and to make sure they're sustainable. You know what I mean? So if we get good programming that's innovative and fun and funky and happening, like, how do we make sure that we can continue what we're doing to make sure that it's sustainable across a child's education, from beginning to end?
Yes. Yeah.
Steph brings up a good point, by the way, in terms of sustainability and
We'll write that down. I had a good point. Thank you.
about sustainability and, the programming in the school, and when you build it, you grow it. Like if you build it, you will fill it. Like it'll grow, but the difference between, I don't know this for a fact, but the difference between pilot and maybe one of our schools is if as soon as you put that student in a smaller classroom, you're changing their setting, and you have to have IEP meetings, and you have to do other things to change their setting. So you're talking a whole nother layer that I don't know, pilot that people are choosing that school to go. So it's your default, your de facto choosing a segregated or a smaller setting for your child to learn in X way. In my school, if I had a program where I said, oh, we have a program that's great for someone who's struggling to do what your child's doing, and if they have a 504 or an IEP, there's a process that you have to go through. It takes time, and you have to you have to do the certain steps to get that parent and the team to agree to that placement in that program in that setting in your building, whether it's C setting or a B setting or a C setting or the more intense setting that might be needed. So there is a degree of that when you're talking about students with IEPs and needs in a general ed school that when you can't, there is still an IEP driven process there that you have to adhere to.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if I can make just sort of a process suggestion, all of these things are ultimately coming back as a group to the consortium. I mean, we're going to get, we're going to get cost analyses. All of these things are going to get put out for community feedback, and then they're all coming back to us at the full consortium of 20, however many people it is, and there's going to be a conversation there about having seen the cost numbers, having gotten the community feedback, which of these things do we want to include as discretionary recommendations and which do we not? And Senator, I'm just thinking about your concerns. I mean, it seems like that is an opportunity when we get everything back to talk about how these things work together. I'm trying to figure out how we sort of keep things moving forward in terms of if we want to get cost estimates, we've got to do something to estimate and still being able to address your concern about how everything ultimately fits together. I mean, it seems like there's an opportunity to do that when everything comes back to us.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, there's certainly no harm in us asking for more information that we can push forward. I think that for me, it probably comes down to not wanting to mandate and then also make sure that we perhaps are mandating LEAs to thoughtfully address the broader policy issue. That's all. But I love the idea of maybe having sort of the menu with some costs associated, and maybe it's almost more of a message to the department than it is to who's doing things like asking everyone to come up with a gifted plan without funding. Maybe that helps us focus that conversation more. I don't know. No harm.
Yeah, I think we do have to, we have to say what we want a cost estimate. I mean, I think one lesson that we learned from the earlier community forums that we had is because we raised this at the earlier forums and we got sort of generic feedback. And so I think if we want to get sort of concrete feedback from the community, then we have to have something. Certainly for costs, we have to have something that's got, saying this is what we want you to estimate costs for. And then also just to get feedback, I think we need to be able to say, this is, at first blush, what we're talking about. So just in terms of what we send along, I think we've got to.
And I think that feedback that we got was very, maybe almost, I don't know if knee jerk is the right word, but was a reaction to people's experience of choice policy and not those programs and not the need for those programs. I think people definitely understand the need for those programs. But I think what they hear is a program and it being utilized to diminish access rather than increase it.
Yeah, and when we have these
Sounds like
community
that's
engagement meetings, I'm assuming that they're gonna have everything out there. I'm sorry. I didn't see anything. Okay.
It's not a, it's a thinking thing.
Okay. So I guess my point just being like, just in terms of us moving things along, I think we need to, say, here's, like we've done with everything else, here's what we would like to have your feedback about in terms of if we want to do, or maybe there's multiple things, but if, we need to give them something to give us numbers for and feedback on.
Mhm. Okay. I mean, can I eliminate some work? I would say. I don't think we should include in the redistricting proposal what types of programs should be offered and in how many schools.
I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they can do a cost estimate without knowing.
Oh, like, there's no other way to slice that information, like,
Well,
I
can't,
think we need to know what kind of
Mhm.
programs. are
Yeah, at least what kind of
and how
programs.
And how many students.
how many students
Yeah.
would be
And-
access, I mean, couldn't you do that with it? Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was gonna say, can't you cost estimate and just say to earlier point someone said, you just want to, here are some different options and models to look at down the road without mandating anything? Just say like, we believe that there's a potential place for this, but how much does it cost, to Steph's point, to grow a gifted and talented program from kindergarten to third grade or fifth grade? How much does an immersion program cost? What does a STEM program in an elementary school cost to run? Like, can't you just get some rough estimates on that, just so because those are the things that, to someone's earlier point, that's going to draw families in, or it's also more importantly going to engage kids in wanting to be in school for like, so like, these are not like programs that are just like mandated. These can make a difference for kids' engagement level. So like, I think just getting an idea, even if it's a basic program, I'm trying to think, like, they have elementary schools have STEAM clubs, they have art programs that they do during the school day, sometimes after school with teachers. They bring in resident artists. Like, I don't know. I think we have an opportunity to at least strike the iron that these are important. Otherwise, they're going to get lost in the sauce, I think. I don't know. It's just my personal feeling, having seen the way CTE programs and career pathways can infuse life into a school, like what we did at William Penn and like we've seen with our middle schools, like we saw with places like Delaware Academy of Public Safety, like we see with Aspira. Like, these things generate energy in the community. So I don't know if we should mandate it, but I think there should be an exploration of like some of the costs affiliated with these programs for the people who take over to consider and contemplate, so they know what they're doing. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think we need to, I mean, you need to say what, I mean, I think it's fine to have a longer list of programs than we might ultimately put in our recommendations, but we have to say what they are, because they're gonna have different costs. I mean, a gifted and talented program is gonna have different costs than a language-based, learning disabilities-based program. So I think we have to have
Agreed.
that, and probably, I mean, not necessarily identify schools, but you have to also know how many kids you're talking about, again, for cost purposes. So we would at least need to, I don't know if we do that by saying what grades or just a number of kids, but I mean, it seems like those are the two things that that we would have to have in order to get cost estimates and get some reasoned feedback to it.
Is there a way to frame that information more, I don't know if generically is the right word, and I'm kind of looking at you, Nick, I'm like a way to say like, okay, for this program, this is like the base cost per school to stand up a program like that, and then is it like, and then per student cost for participation, I have no idea if that is a realistic way to analyze that, but could you kind of, if it's a menu, could you kind of look at it like that instead of saying, and we recommend that 9 schools with one each of these things? I don't know, I'm trying, because that to me is starting to come around with prescriptive. Can we just have like, you're talking, whatever the things we were saying, STEM, arts, language, you know,
You could come up with some sort of per student amount and just leave it at that and say, you know, the committee recommends that whatever future LEA or LEAs. Consider these types of specialized programming. And from our analysis, you would expect some sort of cost of, you know, $10,000 to $50,000 for such and such program, like. Just keep that a per student amount.
would that cover whatever like the base cost to stand up a program would be? And
You're
like,
probably, I mean, depending on the program, like if you wanted to have like a CTE programming, you're gonna have
Right.
like one-time cost for
Yeah.
equipment, right? So. That's gonna be very dependent on the type of program that
Okay.
you stand up.
Mhm.
So it depends on the recommendation the committee makes,
Okay.
but you can do it in a way that's not overly prescriptive and may not require a ton of analysis.
Okay.
It depends on the direction we want to go in. Sorry.
I mean, that's kind of what we've been doing with the other resolutions that we've sent, is we've had, you know, we've asked for different, you know, we've asked for numbers for, you know, different options and different scenarios, so I'm not sure this is inconsistent with that.
Okay.
So would it make, I know that we, I mean, the next logical step would be to sort of talk about what we wanted to have be on this list, but I know that we have a couple of people online and a couple of folks who are here who are members of the public, and I don't know if what they might want to talk about would be relevant to our discussion, so would it make sense to stop and have public comment now, just so that we have the benefit of members of the public who have an interest in this issue specifically to speak?
I would say yes.
Well, let me start with folks in the room and then we can go to folks online, but if any members of the public are here and want to weigh in on what you've been listening to, now would be the time. Go ahead.
So I'm speaking as an advocate and a compliance person in the state now, not in my official role. You're headed down a rabbit hole that is neither best practice nor lawful. The way you're talking about, particularly programs for students with disabilities. You do not create a segregated program. Create a program that can be embedded in an inclusive environment. And all these programs don't just benefit students with disabilities. They benefit all students, particularly students who have other challenges. So I realize that's the way the district's been forced to do it because of lack of funding. It's much less expensive to just jam everybody in a segregated room and have the teachers there, but it's not lawful. It never has been. It's not, certainly not best practice. So I'm a little concerned that that's the scoring methodology you're doing, and just continue what is, you know, a terrible practice in the state for years and years. If we're gonna do this, let's do it right. You know, if you have X number of kids with disabilities who need a certain structure, then make that structure available in inclusive rooms. So 25% of your students with disabilities in the classroom are kids with disabilities. The rest are typical or unidentified. And you have to have enough classrooms to cover the kids you have with those needs. That's how it's supposed to be done under federal law. So again, just really concerned that we're continuing to follow the terrible practices that Delaware has done for years and years.
I have some questions for you, but I don't want to interrupt the other members of the public
public
comment.
comment,
Yeah.
listen.
Right. They're actual questions, but I'll wait. Kathy, I don't know if you wanted to.
Well, my head is kind of swimming. In my career, we started kind of where the child was. And when I think about the reading levels of many of the kids in Delaware, it's not good enough. And so I'm coming at it from, I don't know whether this is doable or not, but more from a voluntary basis, if there was money, to not be focused so much on IEPs and more the bureaucratic necessities that have to be there, but almost an experiment to see what can be done for children who are young, and I think starting where they're very young, and they have sound symbol recognition problems, or that language-based listening, hearing, speaking, spelling, the foundation, fine motor, gross motor, if they have attention problems, they're not going to be able to sit in a chair and have an auditory-based education. So I'm coming at it more from the reality of what many of what I see having, come from pilot, many kids who desperately want to learn. So my way of looking at it would be, is there an experiment that could be done with kids who test out, who are not at grade level, who may not have the skills, the basic foundational skills to be successful in a class? They may in fact be gifted, but they may also have learning problems. So if there would be, in my dreams, there would be funding to start with a class somewhere in a willing district of young kids and have a more science and evidence-based phonics program that helps these kids have a multisensory way to learn and see what happens. So rather than top down with what the rules are, start at the bottom with, I think there are quite a few kids who would probably love to learn and feel so empowered. And their parents might also feel very thrilled to try it and see what happens. But that's just probably naivete, but that's my vision.
Elena, was there anybody online from the public who wanted to comment?
Yeah, I asked if they could raise their hand on Zoom, but I don't see anyone. But if you would like to offer public comment, feel free to come off mute. And it's 2 minutes per individual and 3 if you're representing an organization.
Okay, well, if anyone changes their mind, we've been somewhat flexible about this. So, having now heard public comment and being an attorney who has, over the years, helped write a lot of Delaware statutes involving, these issues and has guided a child through the process. I would say specifically with respect to inclusion and IEPs and students with disabilities, of course, it is a given that whatever we ultimately do has to comply with federal law. B, I think that there is absolutely the possibility of having a program within a school focused on students with language-based learning disabilities that does comply with federal law and inclusion. Inclusion is required to the extent that it is feasible and good for the student. We have many situations where students are in separate settings for a portion of a school day where it's more appropriate for them for the benefit of their learning. So I am confident that we can come up with a program that is good for these students, that employs a lot of the practices that have been very successful for students at Centerville, at the college school, at Pilot, at a number of schools in surrounding states, and do so in a way that complies with our legal responsibilities. I mean, we don't have a choice. They're legal responsibilities.
We do have a choice because we haven't been doing it for years. But I'll agree with you fully. We can do. Certainly.
In
It's
federal
not,
law,
it's not magic.
every child's entitled to a free and appropriate instruction. And that doesn't always mean that they're in a big class.
No,
It can mean that, but it doesn't have to mean that. What
because
is
that is the
appropriate?
first option, and then you only move from that when you cannot provide the level of education in that setting. So the problem in Delaware is that we use administrative convenience to move kids out of the inclusive setting, is because it's not convenient to provide those services in an inclusive setting. It's more expensive. It's primarily what it is, not that educators don't want to do it, it's just we don't have the funds.
Well, the programs that are phonetically based and scientific and evidence driven, it's a way of teaching. And it's repetition. And it's a good bit circular until there's mastery. And it's not a straight line of do this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you have trouble remembering, I'm simplifying what happened on Monday, how the heck are you gonna have that independently to use on Wednesday and Thursday to get the new stuff? So the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I am most concerned about hopelessness. And I am most concerned about the children in Delaware that are not reading and independent where they should be.
And those are lots of kids who aren't identified with a specific disability, but quite honestly, in the city, we have kids that are heavily impacted by trauma. And
Yeah,
trauma
so
creates
much
massive
so.
executive function issues.
Yeah.
They need the exact same curriculum
Yes.
to be successful as kids with disability, even though they're not identified. So this should be a universal set of supports for kids, ideally
It wouldn't
everywhere,
hurt
but
a
certainly
soul.
in the city.
Wouldn't hurt a soul.
No, it's best practice for any
Yes.
kid, really.
Right. That's different from a magnet program.
It's, yeah, I think, I mean, I'm trying not to sort of dance on the head of a pin. I mean, I think that there is, the kinds of programs that are run at the private schools that have had a lot of success with kids, specifically with language-based learning disabilities. It's a very specific program. It's not necessarily appropriate for every single kid in the school, or even every single kid with a learning disability.
Mhm.
And so I don't know that I think it is more complicated than just saying we're gonna implement a new curriculum school-wide. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's some specific practices. I mean, those kids make up a large percentage of all the kids diagnosed with disabilities. I think it's
Mhm.
close to half of kids with IEPs have some diagnosis of a language-based learning disability.
And I think if it starts out with young children, the goal would be to have them have the tools in their tool bag, so to speak, so that they can learn independently and cost less money. I think carrying children with IEPs and special meetings and all of that into middle school. And I'm not confident I know much about what happens in high school, but that's very expensive.
They're unsuccessful and unproductive in most cases.
And hopeless.
Yes. We wonder why I dropped that reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I think would be helpful for us in terms of us going back and what we've done for everything else and trying to put something in writing to bring back for folks to look at would be, number one, knowing what the list of programs is that we want to have feedback about. And maybe that's it. If all we're asking for is, just sort of a generic per student cost, then maybe that's all. But, I do think that we need to be somewhat specific about, what kinds of programs. And, we have a partial list from the consortium, but we don't necessarily have to include everything that was on that list. And, folks can, I thought I heard someone talking about, language immersion, which wasn't on the list that we got from, the consortium, but we can certainly add that the consortium list wasn't meant to be exhaustive. Yeah.
And you mean the things that are listed in the second paragraph? On
Yeah,
page
we had, we had
8?
accelerated academic programs, students with learning disabilities, STEM and STEAM programs, and arts education were the 4 that were listed on the document, but they were just listed as examples.
I think that covers everything except for, language immersion, right? Feels to me like I scribbled my own little list and it seems pretty compatible.
I was
Totally
only I was only using language immersion. There's an example out there of what someone costed out a teacher cost, per year to man this program at grades K through 8. Like there's a DOE so there's a cost model. I wasn't saying necessarily but it is in it. I was using it also as an example as a choice program within the district. So I'm not saying, I wasn't trying to purport to add it to the list. I mean, I think perhaps a better way to go at this is we were given some programs here. Let's just stick to the ones that are on the list just for simplicity's sake, just because it could get uber complicated, as we've just heard, the conversation for the last several minutes with respect to, students with IEPs and who have, it doesn't matter what the language disability is. There's complexity there that I don't know if this room has the bandwidth to tackle, nor does Reading for that matter.
And
Yeah.
keep in mind, not every program requires extra funding. So, it's just a
Exactly.
matter of a different model of staffing. But we don't pay, dual language immersion teachers any more than regular teachers. So it's not always tied to more funding. It's just being innovative and addressing the needs.
Senator Lockman, there was a comment from Jess in the chat, maybe consider programs that address students' deficits that they are already facing. And I also want to mention, we did receive an email from one of the teachers who was able to attend the educator advisory panel town hall last night, Nora Durant. She also sent a message that I can read out to the group as well.
Sure.
That she sent on Saturday, that she can't attend the community engagement event. She'll try to attend an upcoming meeting on Zoom. I'm a Lewis elementary teacher of 10 years, as well as a Lewis parent. Colleagues and I have questions about offering immersion as a special program as opposed to continuing as a feeder school, given our observations and student performance data. I'm not sure when, where, or how to discuss our concerns and ideas with folks at Reading, but I feel it's increasingly urgent to those of us who are directly serving students. And she talked about that yesterday a little bit at the meeting.
So I only have one other thought. In terms of what we ask for with respect to feedback and cost estimates, and that is specifically with respect to the students with language-based learning disabilities, and with respect to something that Kathy said, which I think is a very good observation, which is that I don't necessarily have an opinion about how large any of these other programs would be when they start out, but I think that she very rightly said that for that particular program, we would want to start it very small because we haven't done it before and we're going to learn as we're doing it. So I guess I would, just in terms of putting it out to the community for feedback, I think I would like to have that somehow incorporated in that so that, people, this is not like there's other gifted programs. We have Cap Callaway, we have STEM and STEAM programs, and this is something new for traditional public schools if we did it. And I do think it's worthwhile for people. I think that she is right that if we did it, we should start small. And I think that it is worth people understanding that that's how we are talking about it. So I guess I would throw that out there in terms of what we would ask the community to be responding to with that, with that particular program.
One thing that is scale that can be done with fidelity is useful. Doing things to them is not useful.
We're doing things with an intention to scale them,
Yeah, and then you can scale up.
because we can't always start at scale.
Yeah, you can't. There's a certain scale that you can initiate programs.
I did have a question. Would it be helpful maybe to speak with some of those educators that are at some of those specialized programs, like within some of the, like the gifted and talented programs at some of the districts, and then in terms of thinking about like STEAM or STEAM related programs, just to hear from them and hear best practices from them before, I guess, because I know that we're gonna have to develop a like proposal that includes information about what exactly we want to see, but I think that it would be helpful to listen and hear from people who are on the ground, like already doing this.
And it sounds like we had some, I unfortunately was not able to listen in on the advisory panel, educator advisory panel last night, but it sounds like there were some people already representing those programs. It might be interesting to work to intentionally seek more input from those folks, and I think by the time we have another educator advisory panel, we should have an approved resolution that they can look at. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, the next one's on October 15th.
Oh, 15th, I was thinking 25th, shoot, okay.
We at least can have
Do it?
we can have a draft of one for them to look at.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks from now, we can get that done.
I listened into the meeting and they were
Oh, you did listen.
they were forthcoming and candid in their comments.
I love it, that's what we're looking for.
Well,
Does that give you enough to?
I think so,
draft?
yeah. Yes.
I feel like it does, I feel enlightened.
Yep. Okay, well, that gives me some work to do. And, so when we meet next week, I think we had mentioned a few meetings ago that we were going to have a meeting where possible proposals that had come up during the course of our meetings, we would have a chance to discuss them. I will call it the Kendra Brown Memorial Meeting, because I think you started. So what we have on the agenda for the,
Sounds scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a little grim.
well, I shouldn't call it
Yeah.
calling it the Memorial Meeting does make it sound good.
In honor.
Yeah, the honorary Kendra Brown meeting. So the two things that had come up in the course of our meetings that I had promised everyone we would come back to were, Kendra had mentioned us wanting to talk about potential salary premiums for paraprofessionals who were willing to work in high need schools, similar to what we were talking about for teachers. And Jeff Menzer had mentioned wanting to talk about providing specific, and Jeff, you can correct me if I say it wrong, but that at one point the school districts had funds to have full-time staff person or full-time staff people who were specifically assigned to recruitment and retention of teachers.
Hmm.
And that had been successful while it lasted. And that you would like us to talk about whether that was something that should be brought back. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think that was back to one of the original conversations about you can have all the premium pay you want, but if the culture of a building in the district and school is not inviting, you're not going to get people to stay, but then you also have to have a very deliberate recruitment process. You can't just like create a slick flyer, post it, say work on our school, and then interview you actually, there are recruitment and retention specialists. I know in Colonial, we do have a teacher and a director who are involved with our talent development, which is our recruiting and retention efforts that run across more than just hiring. There's, onboarding, there's a process to it. So that's more what that was in reference to. So I don't necessarily know if that's one of those ones that I would say, to Margie's point, that's a resource allocation decision that we made in Colonial, that we repurposed positions and created teacher special assignments for that specific focus. So I'm not really sure. First of all, I won't be able to be here because I have two district commitments both the next two nights because of the schedule getting pushed back. So I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say that unless someone wants to die on that hill, I would say you could probably pin that one. That was more of an example of climate and culture and what you need to do to sustain it if you're going to build it. So I'm not really sure where the appetite is for that conversation.
And I do have a request since it's my Memorial Day,
Your Memorial Day.
I have an exhibition that day.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's next week Tuesday, right? Yeah.
uh-oh.
So the rooms are swapped.
We already swapped.
Well, let me suggest this. If the Menzer plan is off the table,
Uh-huh.
I think that my guess is that the Kendra plan is probably not going to involve a lot of discussion.
Okay.
Because I think, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I think that we are likely to end up asking very similar questions for paraprofessionals that we asked for teachers. So, we could just skip next week's meeting entirely and bring that up at the beginning of the meeting on the
14th.
14th.
Appreciate it.
And then,
When
I mean, do you think that will still allow enough time for the conversation you wanted to have about charters and choice, and that's what we had scheduled for that meeting?
Thing that
I would like to.
I'm so sorry. But can we, talk about paraprofessionals that work with children with special needs and their pay?
Make sure that's accounted for.
Is it,
I mean, I don't know, in the question set or the cost.
Well, can we just make sure that is a topic that we talk about?
Yeah, I thought that was, I mean, I thought that the majority of paraprofessionals, I thought that's what they did now.
You're right, but they don't, that's not how it's presented.
Okay.
Well,
Well, why don't I,
you're exactly right.
okay,
Share your draft with Kendra.
yeah, I was gonna say, well, I don't have a draft.
Oh, well,
So-
when you do.
But yeah, I mean, what I try to do before some of our meetings is put something together to send in writing to the committee members before the meeting, so they've got a chance to have a clear idea what we're gonna be talking about at the meeting. So maybe I will email with you.
Cause not all instructional pairs actually are supposed to not have to do with special need children, but we have so many special need children, there's no way that if you're in a classroom, you don't deal with special need children. I don't care who you are in the classroom, which is actually.
Well, we've got 2 weeks to sort of figure out how exactly we want to talk about it. So why don't I just, be in touch with you?
I mean specifically pairs that are assigned to a special need environment. Like in the setting or in the push thing. Cause right now, they're just instructional pairs. They have extra obligations that only get paid for the instructional part.
Mhm.
Yeah,
There's such thing written.
it's part of my frustration today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want us to talk about whatever you want us to talk about. So the best thing probably to do is for us to just kind of try to reduce to writing. And we've got a couple weeks to do that now, what exactly that is, so that I can just make sure that we get it out to everybody. And I'll put it, Elena is gonna repost the agendas anyway, because we're canceling next week's meeting.
And are
So
we adding the 21st?
I was about to get to that.
Okay.
So I know that when we first recruited everyone to be on this task force, we said it was gonna just be through the end of September. So we have already added 2 meetings. I guess we just took one away.
We did.
So we've always planned to have a final meeting without a specific topic, just to wrap up whatever it was that we needed to wrap up. So I think we're gonna try to have that on October 21st. And that's basically, I mean, that may end up being a very short meeting. But the purpose of it is to, if there's written resolutions we haven't had a chance to vote on yet, to vote on and just make sure that our work's all done. It's not to introduce any new topics. So I apologize that we've gone beyond what we told you were signing up for.
Not in actual hours, maybe in hours?
I don't know.
In overall weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we took on a lot, and I think we've gotten through a lot in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're gonna add one for October 21st, but like I said, I would expect that would be a very short meeting, primarily for the purpose of approving whatever we discussed at the prior meeting and are trying to put in writing to get sign off.
So we'll keep all the final resolutions for the 21st, so including the pre-K, including whatever we generated today and what is generated from the choice charter conversation on.
Well, if we've got some we can do on the 16th,
Okay,
I'd love to do them then, just because I would ideally,
14th.
14th, sorry, 14th,
Really
14th.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
my optimistic hope is that the folks who are helping us with the cost estimates for these things will actually be able to start doing that,
Okay.
because they've got kind of a pipeline now.
Yeah.
So, the sooner that we're able to send things to them, the more of a head start they can get on doing, not you, Nick, the sooner they can get started on doing the work. Awesome.
Did have a question. So in the refined big ideas list, there's also like revenue policy reform. Are we discussing that as well?
No, we are sort of punting that to the fiscal impacts subcommittee chairs to bring us recommendations that they would like to pass to the PEFC, Public Education Funding Commission. We're not going to grapple with those internally, other than our experts elevating certain ideas they think should be considered and voted on eventually by the running consortium.
Yeah. And that's what we voted on when we voted on this plan.
Yeah, it should be kind
Yeah,
of, the
it's-
way it's written in here.
Yep.
Maybe isn't super clear, but that was the hope, to make it clear, that's what we're doing. Hunting it.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.